Hi, this is me, the Comixmonger from Comics and More, introducing Matthew Noe from Graphic Medicine and a lot of other cool stuff. Hi Matt.
How's it going?
Oh, another good day of funny books and graphic novels, comics. It's all we do. Yeah, I was really excited to carry copies of Health and Wealth when they came out a couple months ago, and customers have gotten a really great response to them. Could you tell us a little bit about how this collaboration came about?
Yeah, sure. So Health and Wealth is a comic all about, US healthcare, trying to explain kind of how this messy, wonky, maybe not the best system in the world that we have.
Yeah, maybe.
Yeah. And so it came about, James Sturm, who's a cartoonist and co-founder of the Center for Cartoon Studies up in White River Junction, Vermont, got selected to be a fellow at the Radcliffe Institute at Harvard University. Very rare for a cartoonist to be part of this program, so that on its own was exciting. But so basically how this works is they come and spend time at the Radcliffe campus, and they work on a project. There's usually an end goal in mind. And so what he decided to do was engage with the healthcare system. This was following I'll say that in a minute. So the idea was to create a comic that tried to explain a little bit about the healthcare system and what's not working so well with it, and what some of the impediments to changing it might be. And he did this by partnering with students at Harvard University. So he had Harvard students working on this project with him, delving into research and thinking about how you would lay out the comic and everything. And they decided to go with a kind of a Richard Scarry kind of approach to the drawings, which I thought was great. Yeah. But so the one of the neatest parts about this, I think, is the initial launch of the comic. They actually ran a GoFundMe to print copies of Health and Wealth so that they could ship them to every sitting US congressperson.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, kind of as a, hey, we know what's going on. Do you know what's going on? Maybe you should read this, kind of a gag. And they used GoFundMe because, as it turns out, and they report in the comic, GoFundMe is one of the largest healthcare providing companies in the country, actually, because no one can afford healthcare, so they all raise money through GoFundMe.
Yes, I helped my brother, when he was undergoing chemotherapy, start a GoFundMe, so I do know what that's like. Yes.
Yeah. But yeah, so the idea was this is an example of what the James and the center call applied cartooning, right? So it's creating a comic about a specific issue, using cartooning as a way to think through that issue and explain what's going on to the reader. This is one of many of them. Another one that kind of fits within this genre of healthcare comics they've done is called Let's Talk About It.
Oh, yeah.
That one's aimed at a middle school audience, and it's about mental health and seeking help and getting care when you need it, and trying to make it less hidden, right? Making it more acceptable and making people feel comfortable coming out with stuff.
That's really cool. I haven't read that one, but we've been running, I feel sort of like in a similar way, we've been running 9-year-old kid comic reviews in our newsletters. And one of the little kids picked Guts by Raina Telgemeier. And in her review of it, she talked about how she gets scared. Mm-hmm. And I didn't have language like that when I was her age. No, I wouldn't have been able to and I might have known that I was anxious or scared, but I just wouldn't have been able to articulate it like that. And seeing this 9-year-old kid being willing to talk about it after seeing something similar to herself in a graphic novel was the real deal.
Well, that's always that's the audience that you hope to reach, right? Raina's writing for a, a 10 or 12-year-old reader, and for them to immediately recognize themselves in that story and then gain some understanding and language to talk about it with, is kind of like the ultimate ultimate hope with this graphic medicine kind of stuff, right?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Oh no, so I was gonna say I said graphic medicine and I was like, oh, I haven't explained what that is yet.
Graphic medicine? What's that?
So graphic medicine, in our academic world that I come from, so I'm a librarian at Harvard Medical School. We define it as the intersection of the medium of comics and the discourse of health, right? So, but basically it's comics that are about a health topic or a health relevant topic, right? So like Guts, about anxiety and being sick to your stomach and having, and the embarrassment and everything that comes along with getting sick to your stomach and how miserable that feels. Health and Wealth, talking about the healthcare system, like trying to educate people about something. And so so as a genre, it covers all kinds of things, right? So from educational comics to fictional comics to my favorite fictional one to talk about is usually Mr. Miracle, the Tom King one. And
Okay, yeah.
I think about, like, he's clearly going through some stuff, right? And some serious mental health issues and some risk of suicide in there and everything, right? So I'm gonna say that counts as graphic medicine, though we don't see a lot of people studying, superheroes comics, but we're getting there. But then like Guts is, sort of autobiographical.
Right.
Then there are the truly like 100% autobio comics, a lot of memoir comics out there that fit into this category. Then there are educational ones too. Health and Wealth is very clearly we're going to teach you something comic, right? But so it's this idea that we can tackle these really difficult topics to have conversations about through the medium of comics. Because, comics are, even when it's a depressing topic, comics are still fun to read at the core of it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, and even when they are about more, it's funny, like, for me to be hesitant about that now, just after, what we're going through with this pandemic and health issues, like being in people's faces in a way that a lot of able-bodied people have never experienced before. Like impossible choices where you don't get to choose something you like. You have to just choose. And it's been really interesting, like trying to find the right balance between like overwhelmingly like just memoirs. I guess, it's funny because it reminds me of people like Chris Ware or other cartoonists of that era that were always depicted as being so dark or depressing. But when you're reading Jimmy Corrigan, sometimes, yeah, sure, or other Chris Ware books, they are a little like sad or like maudlin, let's say. But that's never turned me off of reading a Chris Ware book. And I feel that way a lot when I'm reading graphic medicine, and even when it's really hard and like kind of hopeless, like at the same time, it's just a fascinating insight into stuff you wouldn't see otherwise.
Yeah, and I mean, you can even and I think we talk about visual metaphor stuff a lot, right? So like the comics allow you to show these difficult things in unique and interesting ways, and maybe even insert a little humor into a difficult subject in a way that is tasteful, right? Like there's one, I'm gonna butcher the person's name because I don't speak French. There's a comic called The Body Factory that came out from graphic. And it's about prosthetics and augmented humanity, right? And, by Helios choices. I apologize for not knowing how to speak French. And it's really bad, particularly because I love this comic, right? And it's talking about like this person, they have an accident and they suddenly need an amputation and a prosthesis, and that sounds really grim, right? But the comic is in bright colors and it travels, and it's like this, you're traveling through the history of prosthetics along with like an imaginary character teaching them about themselves and what they're about to go through. And it's just I don't think I could convince someone to read, Medline Plus to learn about prosthetics, but I can probably convince you to read this comic.
I loved it. I read Body Factory. It was one
Yeah.
of the first graphic medicine books like specific graphic medicine books that I picked up. And I thought it was great. I like being able to talk not just in the context of like, oh, it must be a steep learning curve now for you, but more of a like, this has been with us for a long time. We've done
Yes.
the best we can, and it's like really cool for me to see the like evolution of the idea through the book. I thought that was a really fun and inviting way to do it.
Definitely. And I mean, there's a series of books called it's things like Pain is Really Strange. And they're short little like 32-page comics, but they come like bound and everything. They're not like floppies.
Okay.
And I use that one a lot to try to introduce people to the concept of chronic pain. It's my own personal thing that I have to deal with, is I have nerve damage and I'm constantly in some low level issue of pain, and existing in the world is exhausting.
Yeah.
And it's really difficult to convey that to people. But sometimes, you hand people that little comic and it can break down some of those barriers for understanding with another person. So like kind of an empathy building opportunity.
That makes a lot of sense to me. And I definitely like, I have my own, like, it's pretty chronic. It's better than it used to be. But like, it's so interesting across a lot of these where I end up feeling a community or a sense of solidarity, even when it's not disorders or illnesses that I have any personal relationship to. It's just, times are tough all over and nobody deserves to be sick. And when I'm reading these accounts of it, it just, sometimes being chronically ill or disabled can feel very lonely. People who don't know what the experience is like really have no idea. And I often find a real sense of like of feeling less alone when I read narratives of other people's health issues, and it doesn't feel necessarily as hopeless. Like, my situation's tough, other people's situations are tough. It's fine. And that's why I really like, and why I wanted to chat about health and wealth, because why aren't we getting better? Or why isn't the system set up in a way to benefit us at all? Like, and it's funny because I was just reading Health Communism by Beatrice, I can't say the name, Beatrice Adler, Bolton, and Artie, I don't remember his name. And they talk a lot about the extraction of value from the disabled and chronically ill. And the way you start up with like how many people work in healthcare, how there's so many different jobs, how it's become like, I think you say 10% of the working populace, right?
And in some places like Massachusetts, it's probably even higher than that. We are a heavily medical industry focused state.
Yes, yeah. To me, like, being able to see those things, and it's one of the hard things, like, you'll hear people try to be like, oh, with no communism, I won't be disabled, or I will be disabled. The constant stress of capitalism is more the thing that exacerbates my symptoms personally. Like knowing that I can't take time when I need it, and sometimes I'll have to take it anyway.
But then you're almost like punished for needing to take care of yourself, right?
Learning to ask for help
like
can backfire pretty hard sometimes, and it's really, I've had some great medical, great healthcare workers in my time, people who really listen to me. And I've had other people that it was not like that.
Yeah.
And being able to place the people you interact with as the patient or the customer, and being able to place them in a greater context of healthcare, I think is really illuminating, especially as like kind of a solidarity with other workers. I had this particular interaction once with my therapist where I was like, wait a minute, what is your day like? You see a person before me, a person that, how many people do you see a day? They were like 9. I was like, the kid after me is 11. And just like, respect to them doing it. It just, there's a lot of work out there right now in this. And I don't know, it feels weird to think of it as like a growing industry. Like, I don't know how that works, especially with like intimate care.
Yeah.
Like, you have to be able to accept somebody. So not everyone who needs to pay the rent are gonna be I don't know. It's a very complicated and interest, like seeing them as trades.
Yes.
Or
Yeah.
like, yeah.
And it gets yeah, we talked in, I was just talking about like there was a recent change to try to allow more residency spots for like medical doctors, right? Because we are definitely, we were already facing a shortage of physicians. The pandemic has exacerbated that on every angle, both because we now are going to have more chronically ill people, likely to have more disabled people, but we also saw a dramatic exodus from the healthcare professions because we burnt everybody out.
Right.
Like the system was already crumbling, and then, oh look, there's the straw that broke the camel's back, so to speak.
Right.
And that was in part because we had this stopgap. There was only so many residency positions, for many reasons, some of which are profit and personal gain driven, right? There is some factions within the profession that want to limit the number of doctors there are in an effort to keep wages high, right? And so to some degree, like right. I mean, an example of depressing graphic medicine, right, is Will Eisner in one of his work for hire things, in his life. You got to pay the bills. Drew a comic opposing nationalized healthcare in the 40s.
Oh no.
On behalf of local branches of the American Medical Association who were opposed to it. Like, they have long been opposed to this change.
That's wild. Just yesterday in a collection, I got this. It's a Will Eisner guide for a rifle that was issued with the rifles. And so I'm going to have to see this thing you're describing. I need to look at it. Like, this rifle guide is so readable. Like, it's really interesting to be flipping through that and then reviewing Health and Wealth again today, and just like comparing the flow and readability of describing really complicated and involved processes.
Yep.
Like, I cannot wait to find this thing.
Eisner did a lot of like educational comics for the military at the time too. Like, that's like, there's a reason that the emergency guide on the plane is basically a comic, right? Like, the what to do in emergency, everyone can look at that and understand it.
Right.
But yeah, so the thinking of it as a trade thing is messy, right? Because it's like we've set the and it's like it's bad all the way down, because to become a licensed psychiatrist, for example, medical school, residency training, fellowship training, all this stuff, that they're all financial and educational barriers to access. And some of the people who would be best suited for that work are not able to flow through that system, right?
Right.
So we are cutting off access to something that, there are people well suited to doing that don't fit the mold of higher education. And we desperately need them to be able to do that.
Mm-hmm.
So we have to think of alternative ways to get involved and to make that possible. It's almost as I'm saying this out loud, I'm like, oh, it's almost like we need mutual aid for mental health care, right? And it's not just we're sharing money, right?
Right.
It's sharing of expertise and ability and willingness to listen. Like that's kind
Yeah,
of where things need to go.
I agree. It's been really, our stores tried to have a pretty innovative approach to mitigation strategy. We've stayed masked up since March 2020. And then we commissioned posters to promote masking because we didn't see anyone anywhere doing anything like that. Well, actually, I saw other bookstores doing stuff like that. Even like last about a month ago, I was in Minneapolis, and every bookstore I visited was still masked up. The bookstore up the street from me is masked up. It's a really interesting thread through bookstores, and I feel like it's been addressed before of like, yeah, we read what we read and we remember it. What do you want from me? You're the one who changed things to be weird, not me, bud. But then being able to talk to, people that aren't involved in medicine or are only really facing this kind of anxiety now that COVID's the way it is. It's like finding the way to talk about it without scaring people, but also while still making a point. Because like I don't really feel like a fearmonger. There are a lot scarier things about COVID that I don't post about. There's all sorts of stuff. And like as you say about, like we were saying about healthcare trade and having the right people involved, or having more opportunities for a wider variety of people becoming involved is really, that's really interesting. That's like, I hadn't really seen it from that angle, and I like it. I like the idea of mutual aid that also focuses on like the opposite of pathologizing. It kind of feels like where it would be like, no, we're dealing with it right now, and we're going to deal with how you're dealing with it. And I find that kind of idea very interesting. That's neat.
Yeah, the avoiding pathologizing of things is one of the, so I mentioned graphic medicine as a genre, right? But it's also like a large community of people. It's a community of practice, kind of, where you bring in patients and providers and artists and researchers and the general public. Like everyone is pulled together, and the idea being that everyone has their own expertise when it comes to their health and their family's health, right? It's not from on high dictating down. Like there is like biomedical expertise is a thing, but it's only one piece of the picture or one part of the picture. And so there's an effort to try to like break down those walls and those barriers. And the main academic text for graphic medicine is called the Graphic Medicine Manifesto, and it opened with this idea that manifestos are there to break through the muck and to change things, and that's kind of the pie in the sky hope, is to try to use comics to break some of this stuff down. And one of the ways that I think that gets done is so the organization that we formed is called the Graphic Medicine International Collective. And every month we hold this thing called Drawing Together on Sundays.
Yeah.
Where it's held over Zoom. We invite people to come in and go through drawing prompts together, and it's this whole community has built up around it where you don't have to think of yourself as an artist to attend. You don't have to be like selling a comic book in a store. You're welcome if you are too, but the idea is to express yourself somehow on paper and then kind of share it together and learn from each other. We started doing this in 2020. When we decided in March 2020 we were going to have no choice but to cancel our conference that year. And so this started as we need to keep the community together. How can we do that? And then even though we've brought our conferences back, it has become like an integral thing. I don't see us ever stopping.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
It's really neat, like the different levels of talent or like familiarity with comics that you're describing, because like especially when it comes to something like your own body and health, like one of the things I like about comic books the most is the experience of the writer artist panning back and showing you kind of from the outside looking in them doing something. And it's such a, I feel such a very specific to comics experience where it's like, oh, wait, they're both showing me it as if they were the content, but informing it by their experience and drawing it and portraying it to me, like how they're processing their memories by doing that. And the idea that like just whoever style like that really worked. Like I love that because you know like comics should be very accessible, and they have a lot of reasons that they can be. Like just you know words and pictures, the old sayings, and I really love the idea of like how do you draw your own situation? How do you portray what you're going through inside? Like it's really neat. It's really neat.
And I think it can, yeah, and it can evolve over time too, right? So the ones that are coming to mind for this are Ellen Forney's books. So Marbles, where
Oh yeah.
it's her own autobiographical experience with bipolar disorder, and coming to understand what it is and everything. And then she follows that up 7 years, 10 years later with oh geez, now I'm blanking on the title. Let me find it because it's gonna bother me.
I hear that. I'm the same way.
So yeah, you got Marbles in 2012, right? A rare New York Times best-selling comic. They don't often make the list.
Yeah, yeah.
Which is depressing on a different issue. But but then she followed it up with one called Rock Steady, which is, you know, she's been living with this for a while, and it's actually it's still autobiographical, but it's also distilling down what she's learned in a way that's helpful for someone else going through it. Like here's what you might need to know and how to deal with it, which sounds self-helpy, and it is a little bit, but it's also it comes from a place of care in a way that most self-help books don't.
I know exactly what you mean. Over the last handful of years, I ended up following like a few more self-helpy like accounts than I would have ever imagined myself doing when I was younger. And like there is something valuable there. I get what's happening. I'm not going to pay for any of it. I appreciate it all the same. But yeah, I mean, when I found out, so like I have osteogenesis imperfecta, and I didn't know until I couldn't look up anymore because I'd broken my back at some point and had no idea. And like at first that was very scary. That like I couldn't even remember an injury that was bad enough that it would break bones. Like and so like at first I was like really uncomfortable about it. And it was in the act of like finding people to talk to that had already gone through it and like knew the like uncertainty of it. And it was really helpful. It was really great to see that. And then like seeing things like graphic medicine books where people are dealing with these very difficult things and producing work.
Yeah.
It's inspiring. It's affirming. Kind of like it shores you up inside and reminds you that like, yeah, there's gonna be bad days. I know. but there's still something worth building.
Yeah. There's going to be good days too, right? Like it's not always all bad.
Agreed. Yeah. No, that's what's up.
And I have to, because you said affirming and I see genderqueer in the background of your photo, I just have to give the shout out to genderqueer. We actually picked genderqueer. So every year the Journal of the American Medical Society asks has a standing column for us to pick a couple of our favorite graphic medicine books of the year.
Mhm.
And in 2019, Genderqueer was one of our picks because it's just it's one of those comics that I think of as like a perfect comic.
Yeah,
And so if you're watching this and you haven't read it, go read it, especially, if you are questioning, yourself or your identity. Like, speaking, it is gonna be like, that's an affirming kind of moment there.
absolutely. Yeah, no, I agree. I really, the book's really good. There aren't a lot of other books I can like point to immediately like it, and I do try to like curate the store with a fair amount of like trans narratives and trans related comics, and it's been really cool,
Yeah.
honestly. Like, for hearing in the news about people getting so worked up about it. And I mean, if you got worked up about books in our store, we would just laugh you right now. Like, we would be like, oh, okay, buddy, sorry. Are you talking about mouse? You need to leave. Like, we like to say that even before the pandemic, there were rules in place for the store. Like, my wife is co-owner of the store, and when she was working alone, sometimes people would say like, sexist, rude stuff to her about like, I'll wait till your husband gets back or something like that. And it's like, especially when you're trading in comics for like to get money from, I cannot tell you how quickly the line goes down in value when you ask the woman owner of the store, where's your stuff is valueless now, bud. You might just want to bring that to the curb.
Oh yeah.
But another aspect of that is we also say you were never supposed to blow your nose on your hands and touch my comics ever. You were never supposed to do that. And so like, it's funny, as time's gone on, people have been like, oh, you're still going to keep up your hand sanitizers? And I'm like, was there something new about hand sanitizers? I don't want to use them too much. Maybe they weren't right for COVID exactly, but that like many people never wash their hands, right? Like, even before the pandemic, they would tell people, don't shake men's hands if you're immunocompromised. It's a well-known kind of secret, disgusting thing.
It was and that is still one of the most horrifying things about early 2020, when we were having to teach people 30-second songs to wash their hands to. And I'm like,
Yeah.
I knew this was a problem, but having it so out there and front facing was just a whole new level of horror. Like,
yeah.
Why are you not washing your hands?
What's going on, guy?
Yeah.
Yeah, no, totally. Yeah, wow. This has been a great talk, Matt. This has been really nice. I'm really glad we got to shoot the shit. This has been cool.
Yeah, glad to do it.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I hope people will come in and, check out Health and Wealth,
Totally.
and then buy some, other graphic medicine titles from you. There's plenty of them out there.
You bet. And we've been like kind of building out a section for it, because as I've found myself doing like disability advocacy and justice, because of I was disabled before the pandemic. Like, what the hell else am I supposed to do now? But as I found that it can be really hard broaching these subjects with people, especially now where everyone's been affected by COVID, one extent or another, even if they're living in denial. Yeah. And like having the like poster project that we started, where like none of it was licensed, of course, but like we'd have Oscar the Grouch wearing like a mask, being like, only Grouches wear masks, like, and just trying to find a variety of ways of being like, guys, yeah, no, times are grim, mask up, it's fine, it's just fine. Like, there's nothing, there's no stigmatization here. And a lot of it also is to keep the store safe. We've been told, one of the most proud things I've been told about the store is from a number of people who say they can't go places.
Yeah.
But they can come here because we've made it part of who we are, that we're going to maintain the store that way. And like, until I heard someone say it, like, I wouldn't have allowed myself to believe that that was happening.
Yeah.
like, and it means the world to me. Like, and it's what's then led into like we saw another bookstore giving away free masks, and that's where we went next.
Yeah.
It felt from the beginning that we were in a unique position to leverage the aesthetics and the the aesthetics of comics to make like pro masking
Yep.
posters. And I don't know, I was really excited to talk about health and wealth and the idea of graphic medicine as a bigger concept, because I feel like I've been stumbling through very similar experiences in trying to find a way to communicate with people about things that they might not want to hear about, but I really need you to hear me. Yeah. Whose
Nope.
idea was to do it like Richard Scarry?
Oh, I'm
I
sorry.
love it. What?
I
I said
I'm sorry.
it's okay. I just had a random question of how'd you decide to do it like Richard Scarry? I love it. It works really well, but I'm just kind of curious about it.
So I think that was just a love of James, to be honest. That's
Fair.
and the interesting thing is, so the style works for every age, right? But not everyone understands the reference.
Oh, really? Yeah.
There was an exhibit at Radcliffe recently highlighting health and wealth and graphic medicine in general. And the like Gen Z, the Gen Z students now in the undergrad programs were coming in, and they weren't recognizing what Richard Scarry. So we've reached a generational gap here, I think now. But the style is still like it's expressive, it's communicative, and it's like it's engaging in a way that like a more realistic version would not have been, right? Like you could not have drawn Mitch McConnell as a turtle in, in any other style and gotten away with it, I don't think.
Right, and been able to keep moving. Yeah,
And
yeah.
Right, yeah, it could have been derailing, but
Right.
But in this style, it was acceptable and okay.
Totally. Yeah. Yeah. No, I really like that. And it just gave it kind of it added a fun element, like exactly what you were saying before. Like it added an aspect, an aesthetic of fun where I wanted to look at the pictures. I wanted to follow the story through. And I mean, that Eisner guide I pointed out earlier, in it, there's a character named Magsy, and it's the magazine to a rifle, and she's got a great face, she's wearing heels, of course, and just like, I don't know, like immediately it engages more.
Yeah.
Like being able to see and I mean, like we've been told by a lot of customers about their kids learning to read with comics, and that they'll read the books at like bedtime, and then the next day, or often the kids will try to retell the stories to themselves. And like we've even had customers like send us short video being like, yo, my kid's learning to read right now, this is what's happening in this video, check it out. And I've been like, oh my god, that's really real.
That's all. Yeah.
It is pretty awesome. I don't have kids, so it was a pretty alien experience for me that I have come to find as one of my favorite. And I've gotten it from a few customers, and it's really nice to be able to engage with our comic book store isn't. We do Wednesday and superheroes, Marvel and DC, sure. We dedicate a third of the store to our all ages comics are for everyone section. And other than that, we estimate about 15 to 16,000 different titles and graphic novels.
Wow.
That's our focus.
Yeah.
And so
but so you could
being able to,
you could start in the all ages there, right, as a reader. And then as you grow up, just never leave the store. You've got everything you need right there.
That's what we try to do, there's so much to look at.
Yeah.
But it's also been interesting seeing different aspects of the medium try to interact with this, especially like, I mean, you'll hear a lot about Hawkeye's ear.
Yeah.
And I think that's really interesting and it's really worthwhile to look into and like as like center in the story, especially since like until the TV show, it was more of a trivia fact than anything else, you know, and finding that way of like showing books, like there are these great what is it called, science comics plagues, or
Science
like
comics
the
so cool.
right, yeah, they're really fun. I always feel weird about it, just like the post-apocalyptic for kids books, where I'm like, hi dad, have you ever thought about your kids stranded and on their own after the end of the world? Like, I don't know how to sell that to dads.
But yeah, I can see that. So there's I keep seeing a lot of conversation about like young readers and fiction versus nonfiction, right? And I guess some of the way to bridge the gap where like we lose, boys stop reading in a way that girls don't still, to use the binary version
I know
of
what you
this.
mean, yeah.
But the nonfiction science comics can help be a bridge for that, because a lot of, you know, young kids are still like, dinosaurs are like, I don't know a kid who didn't have a dinosaur phase.
Mhm.
And then it can evolve into, oh well, what are volcanoes like, and then you can learn about other science stuff, and it can help keep them reading long enough for them to find that new fiction thing that's going to work for them, I think.
Totally. Yeah, that has been the interesting thing about seeing kids get into middle grades and like higher grades. Where, I mean, one of my favorite experiences with this was going to a book fair that we curated, and when I was asking the kids, what do you, when I see comic books, what do you think? And this like middle schooler goes, Alan Moore. And I was like, all right, cool.
All right.
And I was like, what do you think when I say superheroes? The kid next to him goes, Stan Lee. And I was just so close to being like, sit down. Let the other kid talk. He might have some more cool recommendations. Let's listen to him.
Yeah.
But the comic books they are definitely considered a low art by many still. But kids don't see any, like at least the kids that I've been working with, there's no separation.
Well, no,
Like,
yeah.
Maybe your teacher tries to enforce a separation, which is probably misguided and kind of shooting yourself in the foot, in my opinion.
Yes.
But like, there's just no stigma with kids. They're just like, oh, it's a graphic novel. I read a graphic novel. Who cares? And it's just such a different scenario than you might expect. And so, like, trying to find ways to like engage with like difficult or complicated or topical issues has been really, it's been educational for me.
Yeah.
You know, like, and it's also made me like revise like some of my own, the way I treat myself. Like sometimes I'm really hard on myself and it doesn't really help.
No.
And so like being able to read and like see people like interact with the books and the graphic novels, like again, it's community. It's like finding and seeing this thing, and I really feel that the idea of graphic medicine as an aspect of graphic novels is just one of the coolest things to gain momentum over the last such and such amount of time. Like, because I'd say it was gaining momentum before COVID. Like, that's one of the tricks with the last 3 years that, like, no, I know I'm talking about being sick, but people were sick before, bud. Like, they still are.
Yeah. No. The term itself, graphic medicine, is from I think Ian coined it in 2007. So yeah, it's before COVID, but like it's one of those things that it's like a spotlight came on, right? And there have been so many comics about COVID, like educational cartoons on Instagram, and everyone was doing a diary comic in 2020, it felt like.
Crisis Zone, yes.
Yeah. And like we've library world has talked about those as being like those are future archival documents about what was life like in 2020. Well, let's look at what
Absolutely.
people are cartooning, right?
Yeah, I
And so,
read Dog Biscuits by Alex Graham, not realizing exactly how I read it right after Simon Hanselman's Crisis Zone. And I wasn't following Alex Graham when she was like putting out the comics on Instagram originally. And so to just go through the opening months of COVID again was such a like, oh yeah, that thing that happened a decade ago or yesterday. I don't know.
yeah, the time element is still all out of whack,
Very much so.
especially if you're like, you know, when you're someone who is continuing to mask and most people are not, time becomes really confusing because it's like, is it still 2020? Is it 2023? Are these people living in 1950? Like, where are we, right?
It's that hilarious thing about like, did they make us weaker by working too well, or do they not work at all? I don't quite understand it. Like, it's one or the other. I'm pretty sure you can't be both. This isn't an aspect of like more than one thing to be true about an issue. It's
yeah.
Well, it's been an awesome 45 minutes. Thank you so much, Matthew.
Of course.
This
always happy to chat about comics and graphic medicine and eventual communism maybe.
The better world's still possible, brother.
Better world.
What are you reading right now? Do you have any comics you've read recently that you like?
Recently, let's see. So I'm in the middle of reading like review copies of things. So there's one coming out soon called Hidden Systems by Dan Knott. And it's like a look at how what is the internet, how does the water system work, and how does electricity work? These things that we take for granted all the time and are kind of hidden beneath the surface, right? So it's the David Macaulay kind of digging into the systems of things and drawn in that style. It's meant for like a YA audience, I think.
That's cool.
That one's really good. I don't know. I have been on it took me until the collected volume 12 to get into it, but I've been devouring Vinland Saga manga lately.
Cool.
Yeah. But no, I don't know. My room is covered. Let me turn this around. There are comics everywhere over here.
I love that. Whoa, great Voltron.
Oh, it's Power Rangers Megazord.
Well, you've shown me to be the fake fan that I am.
But no, so I'm the center of that are 6 like deluxe versions of the Power Rangers comics. So I'm working my way through that too. So
cool.
highly recommend those if you're a Power Rangers person. But
yeah, not really. I like that they fought Godzilla.
What's that?
I said not really, but I do like that they fought Godzilla recently in the Boom crossover. That's 2 great things that went well together. I don't know, like very fun.
That is, giant mech, giant monster. What could go wrong? Everything, but it did not.
Totally. Cool. Well,
I will say, looking forward to for the superhero people. DC just announced like a new Teen Titans book with like, the OG team back. I'm looking forward to that very much.
It really feels like a good energy. Like it feels like a momentum that I have not seen from DC in years, and I'm glad to see it. Like Tom Taylor writes a really good comic. He can write a real competent comic, and I'm really looking forward to seeing him get more spotlight through that.
Definitely.
Yeah, I think the X-Men titles had gotten a little spread out. There were a lot of them, but in their most, I feel very geeky bringing this up, in their most recent storyline they're starting called Sins of Sinister, it is pretty much directly, oh Christ, we're letting a eugenicist join the X-Men, and now we're all screwed. Now we've all got diamonds on our heads. It's specifically about like, well, you started doing these things and you didn't slow down and ask yourself what you were doing. And like in a superhero comic to like play it that way, I very much, it's a fun way of like turning it back into like a super conflict while also being like, come on, you guys know what we're saying.
Yep.
All right.
I lost traction with I was so excited and into it when they relaunched X-Men, right?
Fox, yeah.
Yeah, I have kind of lost the plot a little because the books kept splintering, and I have to say my favorite part about reading original graphic novels instead of floppies is that doesn't happen.
You get a whole story. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it can be really hard, that monthly thing. Though when you're most like practiced at it, there's very few feelings that feel good better than reading like 12 chapters of 12 different books.
Yeah.
You have to remember where each one left off last month. Like I can't remember any sports people's names or their stats or anything, but man, can I remember what Captain America was doing last time. All right.
Yeah, it's been great talking. And
yeah, I really thank you so much for doing this. And I know I'll be talking to our customers about it soon. So maybe you'll hear from me again.
thanks.
Cheers. Thank you so much. Have a great night.
You too.